California Congressman Khanna joins us now. Congressman, thanks for being with us. A lot to unpack there. But first of all, I want to start with your idea to keep gasoline prices low, and that is a bill that you've introduced in Congress that anytime the average price of gasoline goes above $3.15 a gallon, you would ban the export of gasoline outside of this country. You still would allow diesel fuel to be exported, though, particularly to Europe. And I'm wondering, rather than implementing a ban on gasoline, why not just create the conditions for the oil industry to pump more domestically?
Well, first of all, that would take years, and anyone familiar with the oil industry knows that building more refineries, having more production is a long process that we can debate. But the immediate need is to lower the price at the pump, and the way to do that is to not be exporting our gasoline when we need it to Latin America and other places, but to have that extra supply for Americans. That would reduce the price. And of course, as you note, we exempt Europe. We don't go after diesel because Europe needs us given the Ukraine war.
You know, Congressman, I think, and I had this conversation with the econ panel at the top of the last hour, and it's hard for Americans to think that this is an administration or a party whose policies are partly to blame for the high prices that we are all living through. Doesn't acknowledge that fact. We see a lot of blame on the big oil companies. We see a lot of blame on Ukraine and the war there. We see a comparison made to other countries that it's not just us, it's inflation everywhere. But you go back to day one of this administration, and President Biden, day one in office, he canceled the Keystone XL pipeline construction. He rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement. He enforced a moratorium on some of these leases. And he sent a strong message to the fossil fuel industry that to tamp down production, okay, that this is an administration moving in another direction. So they did, and that caused investments to dry up in producing more here at home. So do you put any blame on this president's policies for these sky-high prices people are having to pay today?
No, not for the current crisis. And the reason is that the production of oil, it's not quite at 2019 levels, but it's higher than 2020, higher than 2021. And by 2023, it's expected to be at record levels. Same with natural gas. It is at one of the highest productions that we've seen in this country. Now, you can argue whether the administration's policies are going to have an effect 5 or 6 years from now, and that's a fine debate to have. But there is just no evidence that the administration policies are causing the price hikes today. That is being caused by the pandemic, supply chain disruptions, by the war in Ukraine, and other external effects, and by the Saudis and OPEC making the cuts.
Well, the president, as we pointed out at the top here, Congressman, has gone back to his favorite boogeyman, which is blaming the oil and gas companies for making huge profits while the price of oil and gasoline continues to increase. So I want to go to call for number 2 here, because Amos Hochstein, who is his point person on oil and gas production, who's currently in Abu Dhabi at a conference there, says, look, it's fine for the oil companies to make profits as long as they reinvest them. But here's what the Wall Street Journal says about this idea of reinvestment. The president, who has done everything in his power to limit U.S. oil investment, is now furious that he succeeded. Mr. Biden is miffed in particular that companies are returning cash to shareholders rather than increasing supply. You should be using these record-breaking profits to increase production and refining, he said this month. But the progressive climate lobby and his own administration's climate policies have been urging the opposite. So you talk about this, Congressman, as being a long-term thing, but if you create an environment where the oil and gas industry thinks, look, our time is limited, so why should we take this money that we're making and reinvest it in infrastructure and oil and gas drilling? Let's return it while we can to our shareholders, because we're a private company and we have a responsibility to make our shareholders money. And that is a direct result of administration policy saying we want to kill the oil and gas industry. So why would they invest in the future?
First of all, no one wants to kill the oil and gas industry. Let me just make that clear. I think we need to make sure that we have the energy to keep
Wait a minute. You just said that no one wants to kill the oil and gas industry?
Well, no one in the Democratic Party. I certainly don't want to kill the oil and gas industry.
Well, you're not everybody. I'm sorry, you're an important congressman, but there are a lot of people in your party who want to put the final nail in the coffin of this industry.
Well, I think our first goal is to keep America safe and America strong. And everyone in the Democrat Party that I talk to, and the president believes we need American manufacturing here. That means we need energy here. And the president believes that we need that energy while oil and gas is a key component of it to have that here. But here's the point. Some of that investment happened before the administration, where Wall Street and finance was saying that long term you're going to have more renewable energy, and they didn't lend the capital to oil and gas. That was actually happening even during the Trump administration. Now, what the president has proposed is windfall profits tax that Larry Summers, others are questioning. Here's my question for folks. Why are these oil companies saying, Shell on the record in Europe, yes, we understand Europeans are suffering. We're fine with paying a 20% windfall profit tax then so Europeans can get help. Why is it okay for Europeans to get help but not Americans? Why is it okay for them to pay that tax in Europe?
But what is it going to do for the big picture? To your point, Larry Summers says, I'm not sure I understand the argument for these windfall profit taxes on energy companies. If you reduce profitability, he says, you will discourage investment, which is the opposite of our objective. So what is your goal with that?
Well, the goal is to provide relief to the American people, just like they're providing relief to the Europeans. Why aren't they making that argument in Europe? The big oil companies are saying, fine, tax us, pay the windfall profits. We understand Europeans are facing higher heating costs, higher costs at the pump. They're taking that money and giving it to Europeans. So if it's good enough for Europeans, why is it not good enough for Americans? The reality is they're not investing that in new drilling, and the refineries, as you know, take 5 years. Now, I am for, we have about 130 refineries in this country. We should have refineries. We should have functional refineries working. And if we want to have a plan to make sure we're investing appropriately on that, let's work in a bipartisan way.
Have you addressed this at the White House? Because Brian Deese, who advises the president, he says the goal is zero fossil fuel use in this country. Refineries got that message, Congressman, and they started shutting down.
No, what Brian Deese is saying is that the long-term aspiration is to have massive investment in renewable energy. But anyone, look, the president's
No, he actually said the goal is zero fossil fuel use.
By what year did he say that?
I wish they were that specific.
But the point is, look, anyone with the president, I know this about the president, one of his key goals is bringing manufacturing back. He saw the deindustrialization of Scranton. I helped lead the CHIPS Act, building semiconductor manufacturing, bringing it to Ohio. We need energy. Obviously, you need oil and gas right now to function in a manufacturing economy. That's just common sense. Now, where we disagree with Republicans is I want massive investment in renewable energy. I'm probably more bullish on renewable energy. They believe the transition is going to be slower, and let's have that debate. But that's a debate about the future. No one is saying that currently we don't need oil and gas. That's just obvious looking at the statistics.
Well, let me, Congressman, if I could, and I really appreciate the spirit of discussion that we're having on this. If you do speed this transition, as many in your party would like it to happen very, very soon, do you not run the risk of things like extremely high prices for oil, extremely high prices for gasoline, shortages of diesel, shortages of home heating oil, because the oil and gas industry is looking at the future and saying, this doesn't look bright. We're not going to invest in infrastructure and exploration, because you have this entire wing of the Democratic Party that's pushing for renewables now. I mean, do saner heads not need to prevail here to say, look, we all want to have a future where we have abundant energy, and if it's clean energy, that would be even better. But we can't do this tomorrow. It needs to be a long-term project.
Of course it needs to be a long-term project, and what I think Democrats believe is let's have a moonshot on renewable energy, solar, wind, hydro. Let's also invest in nuclear. That has to be part of the solution, according to the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. And what I would say is our first goal should be American security and the American economy. And we're not going to do anything that's going to compromise that while we make these massive investments in renewable energy. And then the debate can be how fast can we have the transition and how much to invest in a moonshot on renewable energy. But the biggest way to get free of Russia, Iran, Venezuela, and Saudi Arabia is to invest in alternative sources here.
All right, we've got some breaking news to get to. I just want to make sure I polled it on the record. The only viable path to energy independence is to reduce fossil fuel use to zero, said Brian Deese. Khanna, we always appreciate you coming on. We really do. We appreciate the conversation. Obviously, a big decision for voters come Election Day, 7 days away. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
you.
Good to see you.